Good evening, everyone.
Hello, hello.
How's everyone doing tonight? Feel free to drop your energy in chat there if you desire. We've got a super fun subject for tonight, the recession. I hope when you get done tonight, you won't necessarily have such a negative connotation with that phrase. You realize that participating in the recession as an emotional state is an entirely optional mindset to have. And most of the greatest fortunes ever made happened in the season of winter. So we're going to talk about the seasons as we love to remind ourselves of this
Yeah.
lovely painting behind us. We are an organization that thrives in winter, an anti-fragile organization. We hope that we can provide you with some clarity, some confidence, a sense of conviction or commitment. A bunch of C words there.
Love it. Love it.
I think you're going to have a fun time talking about the recession tonight.
Yeah. Hello to everyone. Thanks for chiming in chat. I'd love to hear from you guys. How are you feeling about the recession? Are you coming curious or worried or excited, or maybe you've already had some losses in stocks or changes at work or whatever? I'd love to hear. It's so helpful for us to know what people are experiencing all over the country in different settings and all the different things that are going on in your life. Slightly worried, but excited at the same time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully we can give you a few more things to be excited about, or a few fewer things to worry about. I'd say that's pretty much our goal for the evening here.
Yeah. One thing that I'll start with is, and Nick has no idea I'm going to say any of this. Funny face. Is so Nick and I always make our slides like immediately before we present, like hours before, and we do that on purpose because we always want our content to be literally up to the minute. Poor Rachel on our team for our live event in July, she's like, if you guys want a workbook, you better get to it because I need time to prepare it. And I'm like, well, like, what if something happens? What if Russia bombs somebody new by then? Like our content might be completely different. So as we were making our slides today, and we also don't rehearse at all. We really like it to be just,
hopefully it doesn't show too much.
Y'all should like send us like little private messages like maybe you should rehearse a little more. Is the good Lord willing, that's just a phrase I use. It's an agnostic phrase. We all live through many more recessions, and this is just part of the economic cycle. We know that it comes. We know that there's boom and bust, up and down. There has to be to have churn in the system, to have innovation and culling and all of the things that are needed for any type of healthy ecosystem. And economics is just a type of ecosystem. It's really the study of human behavior and how humans make decisions surrounding capital. And I hope that all of us here tonight have 10 more recessions ahead of us. And Nick's mom is not doing very well. And we've known that for a long time. She's been in poor health for a long time. And it's speeding up. And she probably has weeks to live at this point. And so we've been spending a lot of our time being with her and our children and making plans around that. And as we were preparing our slides, I thought, Susie won't have another recession. Like this is it for her. And how lucky we all are that we get to live through this recession and the ones after. And that we have the opportunity when we're alive to choose how we show up. And the only time we lose that ability is when we lose our life. And how fortunate we are to occupy that space together. And I would ask you, Nick's a very, he's kind of a private guy. He's the only child. His mom raised him. His dad was never around. Send him a little message in the coming days.
Appreciate it.
I think he'll appreciate that from all of you, and just knowing that people are thinking about him.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. That's what we got. Should we get started?
Guess so.
Let's do it. All right. Well, here we are. For those of you that are new, it's always fun to see our audience grow and change. We're so grateful to have the opportunity to serve you and to share what we think we know about real estate and investing. And we like to share this slide. We say at the beginning of every presentation, we share this. Certainly not to brag or anything like that, but we think everyone should always be asking themselves, who are they receiving information from, and what is the position of the person that they're receiving information from. So we do a lot of real estate. We live and breathe real estate day in and day out. We have a sales team at Keller Williams, the Black Swan team. We did over 75 million in sales last year. And that put us in the top 1% of agents. And so we're able to join Gary Keller's mastermind once a month. And we want to share that abundance with all of you. So many of our slides today are from Gary's presentation just a few days ago. So we're absorbing the best content we can get our hands on and kind of, bringing it all together and trying to come up with a narrative and a synthesis for that, and then sharing that back out. So many of the slides that you see tonight that have like a black background and kind of neon colors, those come straight from Gary Keller. So we want to give credit where credit is due. We have a lovely property management company, Black Swan Living Property Management. We're over 200 million in assets under management, growing very quickly. Our kind of next big goal, if there is one, is to have $1 billion in assets under management. We think we'll get there in less than 7 years. We're targeting maybe 5. And we really want to do that so that we can have more quality, more control, more consistency, more economies of scale, more vertical integration, so that we can maximize the value and the return on those assets as much as possible. We raise capital. So we're at over 45 million of capital raised. Our opportunity that we have available right now is Black Swan Fund 2. So that's a $30 million fund. With that, we are acquiring Tanara Villa in Tacoma, Washington. Very excited about that project. We're closing in a little bit more than a month. It's about a $25 million acquisition. We have a huge value add plan. It's just staggering construction that we're going to do in that community to just completely change it both inside and out. And then we also got our next deal under contract just a few days ago. And so we're excited to share that. We'll talk a little bit about it at the end tonight. And then we have our webinar on July 7th. So mark your calendars there for that webinar to hear about our next asset that will be in Black Swan Fund 2. We're working on some ground up construction. So we own a neighborhood of townhomes here in Minnesota. It's about a $40 million project. We are halfway through, about 2/3 of the way through phase 2. We're going to start leasing one of those buildings here in the next year. And then we're working through all the paperwork. That will be 115 townhomes. And then we personally own about $40 million of real estate. Really believe in direct asset ownership, and everything that we do comes from that ownership mentality. So we didn't come to private equity as fund managers. We came to private equity as owners of real estate and just kind of have grown organically from there. So we started self-managing. We've done all of our own self-managing. We created our own property management company. Nick became a real estate agent. Just coming from that ownership mentality has always been so important for us. That's a little bit about us for those of you that are new to us. These are our 4 beautiful children. 3 of them there are alive with us, and our 4th baby was still in utero at that time. He's now 10 weeks old, and I think this is our first community hour that he's not with us. So
I just missed that. You're missing your accessory.
Yeah,
there.
He's getting a little old to just wear in a baby carrier for hours on end. He likes to talk and move and kind of babble and all that stuff. He's not talking at 10 weeks. He just makes sounds. Not crazy enough to have a 10-week-old that talks.
All right. Let's dive in.
Did that give you enough time?
It did.
All right.
We show up for people.
We do. Here we go.
So we're going to talk about some fun concepts today. We'll have some charts and graphs. I think you can get all that stuff from CNN. The stuff that's really life-changing, I think, it tends to be mindset. So we're talking about the anti-fragile concept from Nassim Taleb. That's where we get our company name Black Swan from. Is from Nassim Taleb. Some really incredible concepts.
Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
That's correct. Yeah, another fellow Nicholas. That's my legal name is Nicholas. It's colloquially Nick. We're going to talk about the seasons of life. And truly a life-changing concept that you can master. We need to have a whole talk on that. I did a great talk on Seasons of Life, right when the pandemic hit. We should dig up a link to that or something like that. That was helpful, I think, for our community there. We're going to talk about where we are in terms of inflation, interest rate, overall economy, and the black swans that brought us here. That's what everyone was talking about, is inflation, interest rates. So we're happy to give you what you're probably here for, what you're looking for, and talk about what happens next. The immediate future, tactical future can be hard to predict, but strategic future is actually relatively easy to predict. Things tend to normalize and to repeat over time. The seasons of life, they repeat over and over again. And then we're not just going to talk about abstract stuff. We're going to get concrete. We're going to get actionable. We're going to talk about things that you should do, and probably more importantly, the things you shouldn't do in times of recession. And then close out with just a little discussion about mindset and media. And we're going to show you a few sneak peek photos of our latest deal under contract, which is a really special, just a special asset.
Yeah,
so
we're really excited. Nick almost gave it away. I forget what live thing we were doing, but you were like, and it's marble and it's this and it's in this location. I'm like, Nick, we're not under contract. Stop talking. But now we are, so we can talk.
Absolutely.
Put your questions in the chat. Rachel kind of compiles all of those for us, and we have a Google Doc going.
Make sure to do some Q&A.
We for those of you that know, I'm sure you have your popcorn popped and your feet are up. For those of you that don't, we tend to go until all the questions are answered. If we're able to, we kind of weave them in as we go, but if not, we'll make sure we get them at the end. So bring your questions. We want this to be valuable for you. We want this to be a good use of your time, and for you to leave feeling like you have a new understanding or a new way of thinking, or have your questions answered.
Yeah, let's dig in.
Did we do our disclaimer?
Oh, yeah.
This is all entertainment. Hence the popcorn and the feet up and all of that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about things like predictions, or what we might do, or how we might behave. We are not attorneys, accountants, any of those things.
We are licensed real estate agents, so we've got some amount of expertise to speak on the subject matter here.
Yeah.
But this is just for entertainment purposes.
Yep, entertainment. Consult your own trusted advisors before heeding any of the. It's not even advice that we give; it's entertainment. Before making any decisions, and certainly before making any investment decision. We're so good at disclaimers. I'm sure our attorneys are clapping for us right now.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's talk about Nassim Taleb. So, a lot of people ask, where did the name Black Swan come from? Nassim Taleb, Chris Voss, two just amazing thinkers on very different topics. So Nassim Taleb talks about technology and systems and ecosystems, and Chris Voss talks about negotiation, but they both center around this theory of the Black Swan. And when we learned about that, it just instantly, we just knew that had to be the name of our company. And it's a little bit weird, right? But everything that we do centers around Nassim's principles of anti-fragility. Another book that's similar to this is by Ryan Holiday. He's an author who writes about Stoic principles, so very different than Nassim, who uses a lot of data and analytics and statistics and deep analysis of situations, and particularly historical situations that have happened. Ryan Holiday is a Stoic, and so it's all based in philosophy, and his book is The Obstacle is the Way, but they're really quite similar.
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard anyone make that connection before, so I think you're onto something there, babe. So just a couple of little sentences here, but anti-fragility is the idea that your organization, your mindset, whatever it is, your strategy, it gets better when things get tougher. Or
it doesn't just survive.
Chaotic. That's right.
Yeah.
So if you think like the Navy SEALs, they would be like the epitome of an anti-fragile organization. In fact, their mission, their demolitions experts, is to go and sow chaos, and then they are trained to capitalize on that chaos that they instigate. And while I don't know if sowing chaos is necessarily a great mission in most contexts, the ability to survive and to thrive in the face of unpredictable events is what really makes or breaks an organization. Your ability to adapt, to improve, and to overcome, and to ultimately make the obstacle the way. So Stoic philosophy. You want to speak to obstacles the way, or?
Go for it.
Yeah. So that's the idea that if there's something really challenging in your path, it's probably something that's challenging to a lot of people. And so most people, they look at that obstacle, they get very focused on it, and they say, well, this is why I can't move forward. So we're going into recession. Now is a terrible time to buy. We'll let you know a little secret. The 12 years we've been doing this, it's never been a good time to buy. Literally, every person we talk to, they have a good reason why now is a terrible time to buy. It doesn't matter what economic cycle you're in. It doesn't matter what season you're in. there's always an excuse not to buy. But if you subscribe to the idea that the obstacle is the way, if you lean into that obstacle, it eventually becomes your competitive advantage. When you find the way through, the way around, the way past that obstacle, all of a sudden, all of your competition just kind of marvels at your superhuman powers. They don't know how you do it, and you just race off into the sunset with no competition in your wake. We've experienced this time and time again with things that have really been challenging for our organization. And so here's an example. In our area, we complain about like regulatory compliance. All the landlords do. So we reached out to the person who runs all the regulatory compliance, like building safety, and said, here's how we run our company. After every single customer service interaction, we ask our customers to rate us on a scale of 1 to 10, so we can see how we're doing, and to gather opportunities for feedback. And we say, if you can't give us a 10, what can we do to earn a 10? And that's it. That's the entirety of the survey. It's brutally simple. You can't use those results for compensation or disciplinary action. It's just for improvement. And so I said, could our city implement this solution so that every time there's an inspection event, every time a property inspector comes out, you just ask, hey, how do we do? How can we improve? I wouldn't be surprised if at some point or another the city actually implements this system. They said they're circulating it. They're intrigued by the idea, and we might, if we're not careful, accidentally create like one of the most favorable regulatory environments for real estate in the country, in a market where we just happen to have $250 million of assets under management. Just because we tried to lean into the problem, we tried to collaborate to help the supposed opposing party in the problem, and everybody wins, right? So this is the idea that the obstacle is the way. When there's something challenging in front of you, there's almost always an opportunity that's associated with it, and a lot of these have really close alignment with anti-fragile principles.
Yeah. I love this picture here where we can talk about a fragile system and then two words that sound good: a robust system and a resilient system, and then an anti-fragile system. So the idea is that a fragile system, easy to understand, that's a system that's going to fold pretty readily, right? I really like thinking about this in terms of like human muscular strength. So let's think about, we have an object and we need to pick up that object with just a simple bicep curl. A person who is very fragile is going to fold very easily. They're going to drop that object and they're just off the map very, very readily. A system that is very robust, robustness and resistance are the same thing. So the muscle will try to pick up that thing and it will do pretty well at it, but then it will, this is great.
So alternative visualization of the same concept.
Yeah, we'll kind of go back and forth between these two. So the muscle will resist and it will do pretty well for a while, but it's going to reach its like peak of robustness, and then that's it. The muscle is going to fail, and you can see that arrow going down. A resilient system, like I think we all think of resiliency as a very favorable quality, and don't get me wrong, it is. It's like 80% of the puzzle, right? So a resilient system might be, if you have a 50-pound weight you need to pick up, you start with 5s, you condition your muscle, you go to 10s, you go to 15s, you keep building, you adapt, your muscles get stronger and stronger. But eventually you're going to reach some sort of obstacle that you can't overcome. And that resilient system might fold under that. But an anti-fragile system is just completely different. It just says, I have this thing I need to pick up, and I'm not quite sure that my bicep is strong enough to pick it up. So I'm just going to innovate. I'm going to think about a lever system, right? Like leverage is one of the most important words in real estate. And levering something in a physical system is a way to just completely get around the rules of physics, of just lifting it up with your muscle. What if I come up with some sort of pulley system where I have ropes on it, and I'm lifting it that way, so I'm not lifting it with my human body? Just coming up with all sorts of innovation. I'm sure, if we all sort of brainstorm, how could we pick up this thing? Then that becomes an anti-fragile system. And then in the other systems, you can imagine that if, like, let's say we're in this like box, right? We're in like a controlled study, and the thing is, pick up this 50-pound weight. So you can imagine how a fragile system would respond, a robust system, and then a resilient system. Great. Maybe the resilient system can do pretty well. The anti-fragile system is just going to be doing things that the other parties aren't even thinking about. They're just innovating, they're doing crazy stuff, they're looking for tools and equipment and coming up with crazy things. And then they go to the next room in this, this controlled study, and the next room says, here, you need to pick up a 500-pound thing. Well, the fragile system hasn't even made it to the second room. The robust system is like on the floor, exhausted in the first room, like can't even stand up. The resilient system, like maybe goes in and they look at it and they just like laugh. They're like, I like barely did the 50. Like that was all I got. Like there's no way I can get to 500. Great. Where do I get my $20 for participating in this study? I'm out. And the anti-fragile system says, oh, I have this pulley system. Here we go. No problem. I might need to change it a little bit or get a bigger rope or whatever, but I know what to do instantly. And you can just keep innovating around a problem that the other systems just fail under. That is the principle of anti-fragility. I want to go back to the other here. So the way Nassim brings together the idea of an anti-fragile system and a black swan event is there are black swan events, period. We know that they happen. We don't necessarily know when, we don't necessarily know why until after they've happened, but we know that they happen.
And these black swan events are huge events that tend to impact everything that happens in day-to-day life throughout the globe. And they're impossible to predict in advance, but in retrospect, they seem intuitive.
Yeah.
That's the definition of a black swan.
Like if you think of that second room that these 4 participants are being ushered into, when you walk in, you might think, of course they're going to ask us to pick up a bigger thing. Like, of course that's part of the study. But if you had surveyed them at the end of room 1, and by the way, I'm making all of this up as we go, so I hope it's good.
Pretty good.
They might say like, okay, that makes sense that, we're testing like the limits of human strength, or, this is about how a bicep muscle works or whatever. I'm ready to go. Or maybe the next room is like, we're going to test like a squat or something. Like you wouldn't think that the next room would be something that's completely impossible for a human being. You would have no idea that that's exactly what's going to happen. But then once you walk in the room and you see what's happening, you think, of course, that's what they're testing, right? They aren't really interested in, can we pick up the 50-pound thing? Like most humans can probably like grunt their way through that if they had to. A 500-pound thing, probably not. And so when that black swan event happens, here is what happens to a fragile system, a robust system, a resilient system, or an anti-fragile system. And so everything that we all do in all of our lives, we should be thinking about how we turn ourselves into anti-fragile beings. Ourselves, our minds, our bodies, our relationships, our children, the people we work with, the people we lead, our communities at a larger scale, our country, everything. We should always be thinking of, how do I create an anti-fragile system so that I can not just survive, but I can thrive through this? And one of the things that we talk about a lot is real estate is just a great way to practice mindset, right? Mm-hmm. You're making big decisions at all times. You're spending big dollars. You're making decisions around housing and what community to bet on and how to do renovations and who are you going to trust to live in that property with a lease agreement. All of these things, they're big decisions at any given time. And the real benefit in real estate investing is it gives you an opportunity to practice mindset and to hone one's mindset. And by practicing anti-fragility principles and investing, you then learn that skill so that you can apply it to your real life. That's where the real value comes in.
So this chart here, this is a mathematical reality. It's possible to have a anti-fragile investment strategy. It's possible to have an anti-fragile organization. But just think for a moment about the mindset implications of this concept. Think about the mindset implications of this concept. So I had the rare privilege to go train at West Point for a few days last fall. And I was really blown away by the training. I expected, some old school training, and I expected there to be, like military tactics and stuff. And really, they just taught 2 things: that war is chaos and war is boxing. War is getting into a ring, and you maybe have a plan, but really all you can do is just train, and you punch each other in the face until someone gives up. And they ran us through. It's very difficult to describe, but they ran us through a war simulator. And it was a kind of a life-changing exercise. And basically it was just the most chaotic environment I could possibly imagine, and you're trying to achieve an objective within this theater of just pure and utter chaos. And they said, all we can do is we can teach people to lead through chaos. That's all we can do, is just train them with an unstoppable force of will so that they show up excited when they see chaos, when they see things that are difficult to predict. And that's all we can really do for you tonight, right? Like this is probably a little too transparent with you, but our crystal ball, they're all broken. Like, we can have some good guesses from, mindset leaders that Gary Keller, that we have the privilege to rub shoulders with, but no one really knows what's going to happen. So we can show up for you tonight in fear and uncertainty and doubt, or we can show up with you with certainty, because this is the moment that we've trained for, because this is the moment that we've built our business for. And while we're never excited for, something sad to happen to someone, or we're not excited for a recession, we know that we've trained for this moment. We have trained ourselves for chaos. And that's really all that anyone can do. So this is not just a principle, this is an entire mindset that you can live. And again, I hope that we are able to show up for you tonight with absolute crystal clarity and certainty, and you can walk away with that conviction yourself.
I want to brag on you a little bit too. I have all sorts of things I'm saying tonight that I haven't told you about. But I think you should listen to what this guy has to say. Not only do I have the privilege of being married to him, but he recently spoke.
I'm a little afraid now.
This one's good.
Okay.
He recently spoke at a very elite real estate mastermind just last week, and there were 3 speakers: our friend Jamie Gruber, Nick, and Brandon Turner.
And exhibit.
But he wasn't there to speak about real estate. He was there to speak about mindset. But that's the stage that this guy gets to be on. Like, I'm just like, wow, like, I'll just, take care of the home front and raise these babies of ours while you're out there just hanging out with Brandon Turner. And just that you are asked to speak on the most impressive stages and to lead the leaders in real estate. I'm just so proud of you. And I wanted everyone to know that.
I can tell you, at this time more than any other, I am very grateful I married you. So,
love you. All right, let's talk about anti-fragile principles. You want to get started?
We can spend a lot of time. I mean, we can spend an hour going through this, but we've got a lot of other content to get to. Just check out the book.
If you just built your life around these 7 things, your life, your business, your family, your physical health, whatever it is, if you just follow these 7 principles, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah, so we harp on, I don't know how many talks we've done on timeless principles. That was Elaine's keynote at PIMCon last year that I still get rave feedback on. And I'm pretty sure Brandon Turner was a speaker there as well, just for what it's worth. But like if something was, the further back in time something was good advice, and it's still good advice today, it's probably going to be good advice for tomorrow, and will probably serve you well in whatever period of transition is coming. We just talked about commitment. Like, that's really all you can do, right? The worst thing you can do when you get into that room with a heavy weight is shut down, is step back and say, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to see if someone else figures this out. I'm going to see where things go. No, you step up and you lead, and that's how you set yourself apart. That's how the obstacle becomes the way.
I remember when there was a moment in our Fund One webinar in December. It was like 3.5 hours long. I should go back and listen to it, of what kind of led to this moment. But essentially our model is that, we will hold these assets together with our partners for like 20 or 25 years, like a long time, right? Like, things are going to happen in 20 or 25 years that we can predict that there's going to be ups or downs. We can predict that there will probably be changes in laws and cultural changes and wars and technology changes, and maybe one of us will be living on Mars, who knows, but we can't really predict everything. And so people were asking questions like, what happens at year 15? What happens at year 17 in 3 months? And I just remember saying, like, we will never give up. Like, we will never give up, period. End of discussion. Like, I don't know what problem is going to come at year 17, 2 months, 5 days, and 6 hours, but I know one will be there, and that's totally okay. We're 100% committed to figuring it out. We welcome the problem because it strengthens us, and that's it. Like at the end of the day, if you believe that about yourself and you believe that about the people you're in relationship with, it's all going to be okay.
It's anti-fragile mindset right there, baby.
Learn that from Tony Robbins.
That's all you can do. That's literally all you can do, right? And if that is all you do, you will probably be extraordinarily successful, because that's what no one else is willing to do. Just it is darkest just before the dawn, and victory is near. Trying to get through these quickly here. So it's better to avoid things that fail better than to aim for things that succeed. Basically, when they created the iPhone, what they did was they actually made 10 iPhones. Like maybe you can find a couple of them on the internet somewhere. This is a common principle in technology, by the way, that's only recently working itself into other areas. But they made 10 iPhones, and then they test marketed them and just said, which one do you hate the least? Like tell me which ones you hate, because most people are really good at telling you what they don't want, and they're not very good at telling you what they do want. Success is a really difficult thing to hone in on. If you read the book Green Lights, just an absolutely spectacular book. Matthew McConaughey talks about just removing things in your life that drain you, that sap your energy or your joy or your soul, and good things will fill it by default. So again, this is a fascinating anti-fragile concept, but you may accomplish the mission best by simply avoiding the failure paths. Create and implement dual strategies from opposite extremes. This is a difficult one to dig into, I think, in short order. But basically, if you can have an investment strategy where you are counter cyclical of one another, you're probably going to be pretty successful. So it's easy to think about, say industries that are counter cyclical of one another. So if I have a big equities portfolio, I might want to also have a big bond portfolio. If I invest in something that is pegged to inflation, I also want to have something that's like a paper asset, or better yet, a paper debt that backs that hard asset, so you can thrive in times of both high and low interest rates. I could spend an hour talking about that concept right there. That's called the barbell strategy of investment right there. Use optionality to limit risk and maximize return. So people don't realize that optionality is the most valuable.
Optionality is like the key to a happy life.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So what can I do whereby I have the most amount of choices in the future? Let's say that a second time. What can I do with my life and every aspect of my life, and any deal that I do and any investment that I make, where I can maximize my options in the future? And anything that takes an option off the table, is that there has to be a really powerful, offset for that to take an option off the table.
The thing where we talk about that the most is very expensive, very large luxury Airbnbs. Quite frankly, they worry us. I think the optionality is so limited, right? So if you can't hit the occupancy target that you want, or the nightly rate that you want, you might struggle to unload that property, because it's essentially a hotel surrogate. So when people ask, should I do short terms? We always say, we don't really do them. Lots of people do. Lots of people have been successful. But if we had to pick, we would do a short-term rental in a normal home, in a home that we could very profitably operate it as a short-term rental. If that plan failed, we could operate it as a medium-term rental. If that plan failed, we could operate it as a long-term rental. If that plan failed, we could sell it to just a normal family, and not just to a niche market that's looking for a 12 bed, 15 bath, luxury beach home kind of thing. So that's a very tangible example of optionality in real estate.
Yeah. Use redundancy to eliminate single points of failure. So I'll let you on a little secret here. We do a lot of phone calls with people who are investing in the fund, and they want to talk to us on the phone, so they can ask us what happens if we get divorced or we die. That's the doorknob question, as it is. And if they don't bring it up, I'm sure to bring it up for them, just in case they don't want to seem improper, but that's what everyone wants to know. So we have a really powerful. First of all, there's two of us, so one of us can die and the other can carry on. We've got an amazing team. We have redundancies within our team. We have an amazing trust that kicks in if Elaine and I were both to pass away or otherwise become incapacitated. Elaine and I have spent an incredible amount of time thinking about what we want the world to look like when we are no longer in it. This is the ultimate redundancy.
Mm-hmm.
It might seem counterintuitive, but when you think about what the world will be like when you're no longer in it, it suddenly becomes a much more joyful expression of life to merely exist.
Mm-hmm.
You just think about what a privilege it is to be alive. And in everything that you do, just think critically about eliminating single points of failure. I promise you, there are a lot of single points of failure in your life that probably impact you on a day-to-day basis, and get rid of them. Redundancy is not waste.
Mm-hmm.
Redundancy is not waste. In the military, they say 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Redundancy is a powerful concept there. And finally, let randomness be. A lot of people really struggle with this one. They want to perfectly plan the world. So So we for 3 years now we've had this get together with several families, and we keep having more babies. And so yesterday we had
21 people,
20
ourselves included.
21 people over at our house, ourselves included. Almost all of them children. The children outnumbered us 2-1.
Yes.
So it's a small number of adults and a large number of children, of very small children. Our children are 6, 4, 2, and 0. And talk about letting randomness be. It's a beautiful thing, and it's actually easier. It's actually easier than having fewer children, because
Nick and I purposefully sought out families with a lot of children, because we knew if there were a lot of children there, we could actually spend time talking to our friends.
Yes. Yeah, the randomness, it offsets each other if you can merely become comfortable with the fact that the randomness exists. Let that which does not matter truly slide, and you will be able to accomplish incredible things in your life. People spend 99% of their time obsessed with trying to create order and chaos, and obsessed with trivial things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. My kid got to school with 1 shoe. You know what? I think he's going to be okay. I'll make sure he gets 2 shoes tomorrow, but like, I live in a random world. Like, I'm not driving home to get the 2nd shoe. Maybe that makes me a negligent parent. Maybe Elaine's grimacing right now.
No,
I can't quite tell.
You remember that time? It was when Shepard's our second child, and he was maybe like, I don't know, 1.5 or something. And, you know, our daughter was 3.5, our son was 1.5, and I was still in residency, and we showed up at a playground, and I forget, but one of them didn't have shoes. And I like almost started crying. Like, I get 1 day off a week. Like, this is like the one time I can be with my husband, my children, the sun is shining. We don't have shoes. And I looked at Nick and I'm like, they're probably not going to die. Like, here we go, you know, like, look around, there's not wood chips or anything. I don't see glass. Okay, here we are.
So here's how most people would solve that problem. They would try to have this really orderly solution in place to make sure, like a process to make sure that they don't lose a shoe again, right? That they have 2 shoes on their feet. So what do? Because we're maniacs, we got a 2nd pair of shoes for each of our kids. We keep them in the van. We got a go bag, just like they have in the military, everything you need to go on a few hour long trip or something like that. So we literally just have redundant shoes with us at all times. And here's the really neat thing. We do a lot of stuff with our life. Like on Saturday, we went to a parade. We went and visited my mom.
Which is 2 hours away.
Yeah, so that's a 5-hour round trip there.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we got together with some friends. So it was a somewhat ridiculously busy day for 2 parents with 4 kids. And thank goodness we had our go bag, because the obstacle is the way. Like, we always just have the things we need in extra supply, so that when there is serendipitous opportunities to do joyful things, we just have what we need, and we don't need to worry about trying to create order in the chaos. It's not a profitable way to live. So
yeah, absolutely. These principles are so good. I wish we could take credit for them. These all come from Nassim Taleb. So making sure we're giving credit where credit is due. Let's talk next about seasons of life. So we kind of touch on this on a lot of things that we talk about. You know, we always look back and point to the canvas there. We have a nice picture of it here, so you can see it in a way that you probably can't see in the camera. Giving credit where credit's due. We learned this from Tony Robbins, and really just a life-changing principle, because it applies to everything. It applies to your own human life. It applies to relationships, be they short-lived relationships of a friend you meet at a conference and you hit it off and learn a lot about them and then maybe never see them again, a lifelong friendship, a marriage, a parent-child relationship, certainly economic cycles. And understanding this allows one to embrace the joy that comes from each season, and to not fear it and to not retreat, but to say, oh, of course we're in winter. Winter always follows fall. That's part of the process. That's totally okay. In fact, I remember, so I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Nick was born in Minnesota, but we met and lived in Oklahoma I was there for 12 years. Nick was there for 15. And it almost always snows in Oklahoma, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, maybe an inch or 2. Not that big of a deal, but it snows. And I grew up in a climate where it snows in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And there was one winter, what year might that have been? Maybe 2014.
I don't know, somewhere thereabouts.
It didn't snow. I didn't see snow for an entire year. And that second year around, in like October of that second year, I just started feeling really weird. I was like itchy. I don't know how to describe it. I just felt like really off. Like my brain was like, wait a second, like you haven't seen snow in like 20 months. Like, this is not the way the world is supposed to work. Where is winter? What is going wrong? And then it snowed and my brain was back to normal. But I share that story to say that seasons are very important and they're not to be feared, and recession is winter, and that's totally okay when you understand the point of winter and how that leads to spring, that leads to summer and fall. Summer and fall is where we benefit from what we plant in spring. We harvest, for real estate, that's collecting cash flow, growing equity, collecting equity via cash out refis. And in winter, if we retreat and we go underground and we hibernate, then we have no idea when spring is coming, and we're not prepared for spring, and we miss out. And if we don't plant in spring, then we can't enjoy summer and most importantly, fall. But if we stay awake in winter, and Tony will say, you can, how does he say it? You
ski or snowboard in winter, or you can freeze to death.
Yeah, you can freeze to death or ski. You should probably ski, right? Like, it sounds more fun. It sounds like a more adaptive way to participate in all of the opportunities.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone knows how the seasons work. Spring is a time of planting, of excitement. Everyone is having sex and making babies and preparing for the future. The future is incredibly bright. Winter is in the rearview mirror. Summer is a time of toil and effort. So that fun growth slows down, and you have to put in the hard work that follows sowing to protect your crop from the elements, from invaders, from pests, from weeds, whatever it might be. If you successfully sow in the spring and work your crop in the summer, you'll harvest in the fall, and you'll have plenty through the winter. Harvest season is a time of thankfulness, of gratefulness, of Thanksgiving, and a time of joy if you successfully did the right things at the right times of year. And if you have, if you successfully harvested in fall, you're going to ski and snowboard in winter. You're not going to freeze to death. But you have to know that you have to do the right thing at the right time. And eventually you can train your reticular activation system to just look for what season are you in. So industries have a season, economies have a season, countries have a season. What season are we in the real estate industry, or in terms of the world economy right now? I don't think anyone would disagree that right now the world economy is transitioning into winter. We're going to show you a little bit of information that will tell you actually been in winter for quite some time now. And this directly informs the activities that you should be engaging in. So if you're in spring and someone says that they are harvesting, that should immediately make you think something doesn't quite add up here. This isn't the right time of season for this activity to be happening. Something doesn't line up here, and you can be preparing for the season to come. When you know that spring always follows winter, winter doesn't seem so bad. When you know that autumn always follows summer, the hard work and toil of summer is quite endurable. When you know that summer follows spring, you know that, man, this is a really exciting time, but we need to be steeling ourselves and preparing for that summer. I'm meeting with our team and saying, we just got this building under contract. It's a really fun, exciting time. Well, guess what? There's a summer that comes. It lasts for a season, and then it lasts for a year of, turning over units and, doing tons of renovations. It's a crazy amount of work for that harvest that comes a couple of years later when we get to that cash out refi. And then we have to maintain capital reserves, because we know that at some point thereafter winter will come, and we have to be prepared for it. And when you can think about life, when you can think about an investment, when you can think about your own personal life or the life of your children in this context, it's an incredibly powerful concept that gives you the confidence and the clarity that you need to grow, to expand, to lead, and to ultimately live a happy, fulfilled life at a time when maybe other people are full of doubt. We know that we're entering a time of winter. It's not a big deal. Winter always follows autumn. We knew this was coming. Elaine called this back in December. As a matter of fact, she said that as soon as the first blips of Omicron data came out, she said, you know what, this is probably the end of the pandemic. And we announced it in our January community hour. If you go back and watch the recording, I think Elaine called it before anyone else did. Now, again, that's not it's not a medical recommendation. That's an economic or a sociological observation for your entertainment purposes. but we said, some things are going to change very soon. We called out geopolitical risk as the number one risk coming, because the world had been at winter for many years and tensions had been allowed to rise. We hadn't foreseen Ukraine, Russia happening, but we just called out in our January community hour that geopolitical risk is the number one overlooked risk right now on everyone's radar, and you need to be watching out for that. And it's not like we're some geniuses that have some special crystal ball. We just know the seasons.
Mhm.
We know that spring follows winter, and we were coming out of a time of geopolitical winter. The pandemic put a freeze on everything, and lots of tensions were going to find their way to resolution one way or another. Similarly, we've recommended buying through all of these phases, through all these seasons, but we've had somewhat different advice for each of those seasons. And we've been able to, play a couple of seasons ahead. We knew that this time of transition was coming. We knew that interest rates were going to be going up. We've been talking about this for months. I think for 6 months now, we've been saying,
get your cash out refis, get your
cash out
refis, get your refis.
Yeah, because winter is coming. You need to harvest now, so you have stores through the winter. You must have cash. If you run out of cash, you freeze to death. That's how it works. It's not any more complicated than that. So again, we could spend hours talking about the seasons of life, but
I want to talk about Riley actually chimed in. Riley, I'm going to tell a little story about you. I'm so proud of you. So Riley is our director of growth here at Black Swan. And he acquired a duplex about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And that duplex was in winter. So the person who owned it wasn't taking very good care of it, wasn't managing it very well, had done some renovations, but they weren't very good. They were kind of lipstick renovations, the kind of renovations that we just detest. And it was an opportunity, and he acquired it, and he actually lived in it for a while and lived in one unit and rented out the other. So he was able to make a smart move in the winter of that deal by getting really juicy owner occupant financing, because that increased his cash reserves, right? Because he had a smaller down payment than a traditional investment loan might have taken. And he brought that duplex through spring, and that duplex right now is in summer. So things like appliances will need to be replaced, because kind of junky units were bought many years ago and not a lot of love and attention and care to maintenance. He was actually there tonight laying some really nice river rock, taking out landscaping that didn't look good, that hadn't been tended to well, and putting down a more permanent solution.
Taking that metaphor a little too literally in this case.
Yeah, so
in a good way.
So that duplex is in summer right now, right? So it has it's performing. There's tenants living in it. Tenants have been in it for years, but there's expenses coming up and work that needs to happen. He's going to have the whole exterior repainted, and eventually that duplex will come to fall, and there will be the opportunity to reap and to do a cash out refi. And I think actually it just had its cash out refi, right?
I'm not sure the exact timing, but I believe that's correct.
Yeah. But that's an example, within a deal, there is a season. So the seasons of life can be, very small at a particular deal. They can be kind of in an industry like the real estate industry. They can be nationwide, what's happening with interest rates and those sorts of things. And they can be worldwide, and they're all kind of spinning at different times. And sometimes they spin together and sometimes they don't, but understanding like, this particular deal is in this phase of life, inside of this economic cycle, inside of this geopolitical cycle, and kind of getting a sense of how to best behave in that unique system.
Hope if you just have one takeaway from this whole talk, it's that recession is always coming and recession is always going. It is merely a season. Like the sky is never falling. Like the sun rises and the sun sets. It happens day after day, millennia after millennia. And if you just see your place in the seasons and know how to properly position yourself to plant in spring and to harvest in fall, you will have a harmony with nature, with the economy, with your family, with your biology, with whatever it is that will make it incredibly joyful to be alive. And you're never going to experience a drop of fear that the front page of CNN says that, recession is here.
Yeah. So these slides here with kind of this funky black neon background, these come from Gary Keller, so many thanks to him. And there's a lot of data we could look at here, but the thing that we really want to hone in at this point of our presentation is that recessions are not very long.
Mm-hmm.
I think particularly coming out of just the great trauma of 2008, there's this drumbeat in the psyche of the nation that recessions are just like you're gonna die. Like there's just this like idea, like I hear words like crash and collapse, like those are like some heavy words. Recessions are pretty short. They're predictable. We know that they're going to come, and they tend to be pretty short. 16 months, 6 months, 16 months, 8 months, 8 months, 18 months. 18 months was in 2008. And the most recent recession right after COVID started, just 2 months. So they're going to happen. Like I said in the beginning, we're lucky to be alive through every recession that we can live through. I hope everyone here lives through many more recessions. And in the grand scheme of our lifetime, they'll be short. And then we'll just keep going through that cycle.
The fact is, it just doesn't grab headlines to say thing that has happened many times before
will
is about
happen
to
again
and then stop happening. Like that's just not a headline anyone's going to click on, and so it's not how the information is conveyed. So we hope you hear the alternative side of the story this evening. So we don't believe in ever painting an overly rosy picture. Let's be realists. Let's tell it how it is. So the pandemic is over. This is a very exciting thing. So the vaccines are approved for kids under 5. We knew that there was going to be this explosion of economic activity when the pandemic let out. Everyone knew this was not some secret. I think it was difficult to know when or how the pandemic would be over, and it really matters when it's over sociologically more than medically. Again, that's not a medical opinion, and there are still COVID casualties today. It's when has people's behavior changed in a really profound way. As of today, the pandemic is over. And so back in our State of the Market talk in February, we talked about how there would be, lots of inflation to go with it because there's just going to be people who have all the savings that they want to spend. But then a couple other black swan events happened that no one, we mentioned how geopolitical risk was the number one risk, but it didn't play out exactly the way we expected. The conflicts in Ukraine, and then the fact that China is still shut down. This is something that I think not a lot of people saw coming.
Boggles the mind.
And it is still the case today. So, at that retreat that I was at a couple weeks ago that I had the opportunity to speak at, I had a chance to talk to an individual who is a private equity fund manager in China. He speaks Mandarin fluently, just is one of the most immersed Westerners in Chinese culture that I've ever met. And he said that the population of China is, very old. Their vaccination rate is incredibly low. Health resources are not nearly as prevalent as they are in the Western world. And then that older population is very suspicious of Western medicine. So their vaccination rate is never going to get very high. That's just how it is. And if you combine that with the population density and typical kind of hygiene level of China, the COVID is 10,000 times worse in China than it is in the Western world. That's just how it is. I guess I didn't really realize that these things were true. So today, people will go around and tape your doors and windows shut. They have like this sealing tape that they tape on your doors. And if those seals are broken, you get in huge trouble. You could, lose your benefits for life or face huge fines. That's the level of lockdown that's in place in China to this day. And it's working on bankrupting Tesla. It's disrupting the global supply chain. Maybe in the long run, it will actually be a good thing for the United States that China is still shut down, still experiencing, huge economic fallout. No one knows how bad the pandemic is in China because they don't announce the statistics. They release obviously fake statistics. Some people have done analyses looking at how many urns are ordered and stuff in China, and so people think that millions and millions of people have died of COVID in China, and the government just won't release that information. The point is, China is okay with their economy falling apart and the global economy collapsing around China. That is kind of the epicenter of the global supply chain. If they fear, collapse of their society. So this is a very bad thing for our supply chain. This is a very bad thing for, everything from sweat socks to car parts. There's going to be problems getting things that we need for years to come. If China is still in lockdown today with no end in sight, it's going to take at least 2 years to get back to anything even approximating normal, probably at least 3 years. And then the war in Ukraine, we have, high gas prices, high natural gas prices, just a complete realignment of the geopolitical world. So we have high prices for consumer goods, and we have high energy prices. The two biggest drivers for inflation next to real estate, next to housing cost. And that is a recipe for inflation, the likes of which we have not seen in the modern era, which is exactly what's happened. Again, these are black swans. In retrospect, it's all so intuitive, right?
Mhm.
But they're just completely unexpected. I don't think people expected that China would still be on lockdown and things would play out anywhere. If Russia had won quickly in Ukraine, there probably wouldn't be this energy crisis. But it's only because Ukraine is winning slowly that things are playing out the way they are, and it will only get worse. So as a result, we have the highest inflation in recent history. We have a supply side problem
Mhm.
that we're about to try to solve by constricting demand. We're going to raise interest rates to try to constrict the money supply, to try to cool off the economy, and that's going to work.
To get people to give up, right?
Yes.
To get people to say, you know what, there's
Yes.
there's a 2-year wait for a Tesla. I'll just keep driving my 2000 minivan or whatever it is. It's a very interesting. The Fed doesn't have a lot of options, right? Like Nick and I joke, like they need to just get like work boots and gloves and go to LA and start like emptying some cargo ships.
That's right.
Like we need more supply. Like we need people to be out there, creating chips and things that we need in appliances and all of the things that we use in our day-to-day life. But they can't do that. That's not within their purview. All they can do is constrict demand by increasing the cost of money.
Yeah, it'll work. It's going to push the economy into recession. It already has. We've been in recession this whole year. It just isn't. It's not on the front page yet, so to speak. But it's going to fix the problem in the worst kind of way. And so we just have to accept these as facts, right? Like this isn't something to get depressed about. This is something to understand. This is an obstacle to understand your way around. So let's talk about that for a second. Inflation's kind of our friend in real estate, isn't it? I mean, it's not something that's great. Like I don't celebrate recession. I don't celebrate inflation. They're not favorable macroeconomic forces, but we can be prepared for them in order to have an anti-fragile organization, an anti-fragile investment thesis. If we're talking about real estate investment specifically, and we're in a situation today where we have a historic housing shortage. We've talked many times about how we in the United States stopped building houses after 2008. And there's an epic shortage of housing that has accrued. There's a shortage of something around 7 million housing units in the United States today. And it's a game of musical chairs where there were kind of fewer and fewer chairs until there were fewer chairs than people. This is something that we saw coming, in 2017, and other experts saw coming. We didn't just like come up with this. We just do coaching and go to speaking engagements with the smartest people we can rub shoulders with.
And we write a lot of offers.
Yeah.
So even as back as 2017, we were writing an offer a week.
Yeah.
And so we had minute to minute feedback of, wow, this offer is amazing. Good offer, Nick. Thanks. We'll look at it in the morning. So we were able to sense that slow boil that was happening as inventory went down.
Yeah. So as a result of this shortage in housing, and as a result of inflation, we're seeing historic rent growth, just off the charts rent growth. We have 25% escalations with new leases right now on some units in our portfolio, which we're seeing across the country. So it's easy to make the numbers work when you're able to put up those kinds of rent escalations. I wouldn't say this is our favorite way to grow our organization. I wish that housing was cheap and we could go build more units. That's not the economic indicators that we've been given. If you look at a 400K house 9 months ago, it cost about $1,300 a month to own that home. Today, that costs you over $2,000 in increased purchase price and in the increased interest rate on the mortgage. And housing sentiment. So Fannie Freddie, going back 40 years, they've said they just call random people in the American public and say, is now a good time to buy a house? Do you feel that right now is a good time to buy a house? And right now, 85% of the American public say that now is a bad time to buy a house, which again steers more people into the rental market. So we know that there's going to be more and more renters for whom purchasing a home is increasingly unaffordable. And so these 25% rent escalations, they're not changing. Construction costs are getting higher. Right now, we're seeing about 1% per week escalations in construction prices. Just it's unreal escalations in construction price. There's a very clear picture that's being painted here. Kind of throughout this whole bubble in real estate, if people want to call it that. We keep looking at our dashboard and we say, there is no dial on our dashboard here that says there's a crash coming, because this is a fundamental supply demand problem that, if anything, has just gotten much worse in the last couple of years. Let's take a look at some good news though.
So COVID is rapidly becoming endemic. So excited as a family with 2 children under 5 that vaccines have been approved for children down to 6 months old.
The economy just opened up for us day before yesterday.
When Shepard got his vaccine.
Yeah, we can actually trust that our children, our kid was not in school for the last week of school 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I was supposed to be with Nick in San Francisco watching him at this speaking event with Brandon. And instead I was home with our son because he had a COVID exposure. And now, with his vaccination, he'll be able to stay in school once he's fully vaccinated. So the next step that we as a developed nation need to do is have equitable access to vaccines in the whole world, so that we as a human species can really get this thing under control for all people. But COVID is here to stay, and blessedly science, helped to get us through this, rather quickly with vaccines. And new boosters and those sorts of things. And that's going to change how things go in the next several years. Because of COVID, I think the psychology coming out of 2008 and then COVID, people saved through COVID, right? People have this fear of, what if there's this major collapse? That happened when I was 20 years old or 30 years old. I don't want that suffering again. So I sensed some instability. I'm just going to save. So a lot of the stimulus that the government was pumping out to try to keep the economy moving, people actually just squirreled away. They weren't interested in, getting takeout from a restaurant to keep the restaurant afloat. They just wanted to put the money under the mattress. And now people are starting to spend it as the labor market is very strong. People are traveling again. There's changes around, will people go back to the office? Will they not go back to the office? What does that look like? Every CEO says something different. Elon says, if you're not in the office, you might as well quit. Other people say, I think Airbnb says working from home forever. But people are starting to feel like a new normal is coming. Manufacturing orders are at an all-time high. Nick just talked about supply chain. I think we've talked about supply chain like every presentation for the last year.
I never said that phrase until a couple of years ago.
Right? I feel like I learned it in 11th grade economics, and then that's a simple concept. Things just show up when you order them, right?
No one had any idea how fragile the supply chain was.
Mm-hmm.
No one had any idea, because it just had not been stressed by war and by a pandemic like this. And now that lesson is going to be learned for a generation, I'm sure.
Yeah. Historically low unemployment. So this period has been very good for the workers. It's allowed workers to command higher wages, more benefits, more flexibility. That's been very good to kind of rebalance power, so to speak. The United States debt to GDP ratio doesn't look too bad right now. We're a country that produces, as much as we're able to, we rise to the call. We're a very innovative group, and our GDP is pretty strong right now. We're going to talk about that, I think, in one of the next slides, and the change that's happened in the last quarter.
People worry that we created too much money during COVID. Well, most of that money hasn't been spent yet. It's still in people's savings accounts. And they worry about all the national debt that was taken on as a result of that. But the truth is, if you look at other countries, especially other developed Western countries, the U.S. is just, we're looking pretty good by comparison to just about every other country in the world, which may seem hard to believe when you look at the front page of CNN. But the fundamental economics in the United States are extraordinarily good. And I wouldn't be surprised if the outcome of the current situation is frustrating and potentially, debilitating in the short term. But, for a couple centuries now, no one has won by betting against America. And I would bet on America right now. I think that 10 years from now, America is going to be doing better than it has ever done before as an outcome of this. I think that China is kind of forfeiting some of its de facto power as the center of the global supply chain, and it will take a generation for them to recover that status, essentially. And the manufacturing losses that the U.S. has experienced, like that situation is rectifying itself in short order, and with a speed that is unbelievably shocking to me. So when I look at people much smarter than me, people say, here's a time of short-term pain that is actually probably going to lead to some long-term positive outcomes for the United States. And like it's a good time to live in the United States, that's for sure. So there's an all-time high in construction spending. This is actually, I think, because it's just so expensive because the prices have gone on so much. But when you look at things that have a long lead time, so manufacturing orders, I like that stat because the manufacturers need to order raw goods that they, import into their factory, that, ship from across seas, that they create jobs to manufacture, the finished goods that they then export back across seas. They're working a year, 2 years, ahead in the supply chain. And so we know that there is a huge amount of steam of momentum upstream in our economy. And then construction is another long lead time thing. We're doing $40 million new construction project right now, and it is a frustratingly long process. So there's just a huge amount of momentum in the economy right now. It's going to take 6 months for the interest rate hikes that are happening right now to really have an impact on inflation. And we know that there's a tremendous amount of personal savings of just forward positive economic momentum going into that makes it likely that the outcome's probably going to be pretty good. And even if, let's say, there's a many point shift in unemployment, that may not be a bad thing. We might need a recession in order to correct the current labor imbalance. When I was trying to fly to San Francisco, we had a whole flight crew, we had a pilot, but there was no one to load baggage onto the plane. There was simply not enough hands to do the work. And there probably needs to be some shift in unemployment to correct that labor imbalance. That's just a pure inefficiency in the economy when you've got hundreds of people waiting on one person to load baggage into a plane. So even if there is a recession, again, the end outcome is probably going to be a relatively favorable thing for the United States economy as a whole.
And I think that last bullet point really goes with the first bullet point is, women have borne the brunt of COVID childcare responsibilities. It is just staggering to me as a woman, what I have seen happen in my own life and the lives of my friends of, having to make huge career decisions around, well, what if my child doesn't have school for a year? Or what if my child has school, but 1 out of every 4 to 6 weeks they don't, and I don't know which 1 week that's going to be, or and by getting vaccines to the youngest in our population, not only do we protect them from COVID and all of the effects of short COVID, long COVID, but we're able to get their caregivers back into the economy, and that is so important. And I think we're in a place where caregivers, particularly women, have been out of the economy for a few years, but if we can get them back into the economy quickly enough, the trajectory of their career can probably catch up. But if we allow this to carry on for a few more years, think about like your own workplace or whatever, you're usually in a role maybe for 2 to 3 years, maybe 5, and then you get a pretty significant promotion in terms of responsibilities, number of reports, income, benefits, those sorts of things. So women haven't quite lost a whole cycle yet, but we're getting pretty close. And so we've got to get women back into the workforce so that they can, kind of get their careers back onto the same trajectory. And I think that's really important. Getting women back into the workforce, getting older people who have maybe said, I'm not really willing to die. I'm not really willing to go to work and die. But, with the vaccines and medications that are available and mortality is very low, and I've spent up a lot of my savings, maybe I do want to go back into the workplace for 5 more years before I go into my more formal retirement. So the top bullet point and the bottom bullet point are absolutely linked together.
Yeah. So let's look at a few charts. Figure you probably would see
these are from Gary.
Yeah, right from Gary himself. Just phenomenal data. Keller Williams has an entire team of economists on staff. I think they have some of the best data in the industry, along with the NAR. So looking at this chart, it's easy to have multiple different kind of, emotional, takeaways here. Inflation has been historically low for decades, and all of a sudden we've, had a pretty huge spike. When I look at this, it looks to me like we have maybe hit, peak inflation. It's on its way down. Can't say for sure. I'm going to be surprised if CPI and core CPI are higher when the next month's reading comes out, just from the data that I see in my immediate economy right now. I could be wrong about that. They could keep going up. It depends on, if you include energy and food prices, and food prices are going to be going up a lot. Let's talk about mortgage rates. In the immediate term, it sure looks expensive, doesn't it? And yet it's not actually that much.
It looks like a straight line up.
Yeah, we're not actually any more expensive than we were just a few years ago. So back in 2018, 2019, we're at the same mortgage rates that we're at today. Now there's greater instability in the mortgage lending industry right now. And I think that that's something that people find disquieting more than the actual rate is the instability itself. And then if we look at a longer, like a lot more longitudinal number, we see that things looking pretty good. Now keep in mind 2022 is not on this chart right now, but things are looking pretty good.
Yeah. There was in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in, someone said something like, I can't believe you're investing at these interest rates. And I was like, well, wait a second. Let's bring a little sanity to this discussion. These interest rates are not that bad. They're about equivalent to where they were when Nick and I started investing about 12 years ago. They're about where, so this green line here, I'll kind of describe it because I know a lot of people kind of listen to this more podcast style. So what we're looking at is annual mortgage rates from 1972 to 2021. And there's a yellow line kind of going all across that about 50-year span. And the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate during that entire time was 7.8. A lot of that comes from the late 70s and 90s when interest rates on mortgages just went crazy. And when Gary was talking about this, he kind of chuckled and he said, I started investing in the early 80s and my financial advisor told me not to invest in real estate. And then he just had this long pause that was very classy. Obviously, Gary's doing okay. And I think he's grateful that he didn't heed the advice of that financial advisor who, no doubt got caught up in the fear and the frenzy of the interest rates of the late 70s and early 80s. And then the green line here is the historical average over the last 30 years from 1990 to 2020. So, most of the economic time frame of, the adult lives of the people listening now. And that was about 5.97, so almost 6%. So about where we are right now. Yeah. So, we're kind of, I'm going to use this word very carefully. We're like brainwashed to believe that debt should be, 1%, 2%, 3%. It's been great. Don't get me wrong. We have gotten as much debt as we can possibly get our hands on in the last several years because money has basically been free. And then use that leverage to buy real estate. There's very few investments out there that you can use the bank's money to generate wealth for yourself. And when money's free, you can do that very well. We're coming back to what's more normal. And there's this like drumbeat of people that says like, I can't believe you would invest at that interest rate. Okay, has no one invested in real estate since 1990? Like, that's definitely not true. So let's just take a step back, calm ourselves down, look at the data, and know that right now we're just kind of getting more back to normal. Let's appreciate and enjoy that we got to experience a time of, relatively free money in our lifetimes. Maybe we'll get it again. And if we do, we're really going to enjoy it. And we're going to be even more poised to benefit from it because we'll have all the lessons that we've learned during this time. But if we don't, that's okay too. We're going into a more normal time and that's okay.
Yeah. So this is probably the most important statistical kind of slide for you to look at here. And this is quarterly GDP. So this is like a gold standard metric that economists look at to just say,
and this is going back to 2012. Yeah. So a 10-year time frame here.
Yeah. How's the economy doing? So you can see that we had this, really wild ride. We had negative 31% GDP growth in Q2 2020, and then we had a positive 33% GDP growth in Q3 2020. I think we all remember that roller coaster ride. And then here's the interesting thing. So for Q1 2022, we had negative GDP growth, negative 1.4% GDP growth, which is significant. Now, economists have kind of offered a technical explanation, I feel like, for how that isn't true, that like manufacturers and retailers have held more things in inventory to insulate themselves from supply chain shocks. But the truth is there was negative GDP growth for Q2 2022. And I would be blown away if there was not negative GDP growth for Q2 2022. That's 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, which is the technical definition of a recession. So, I think that in a few months, people will say that we are in recession, that we have been in recession for all of 2022. Things are just so good that it doesn't quite feel like it. When unemployment is this low, when personal savings are this high.
People are traveling for the first time in several years. Conferences are going on. Families are, seeing grandparents they haven't seen in 2 or 3 years. People are able to negotiate with their employers. just feels good.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel like we're in a recession, but we are. And in my opinion, this is good news. This tells us that changing Fed policy and the global economy is righting itself, because I would expect that we would see some negative GDP quarters during this time frame as people come out of COVID and interest rates go up. This is what needs to happen. And just it hasn't hurt that bad. In fact, it's hurt so little that no one has noticed that we've actually been in recession all year long.
Now we are talking about housing inventory. So this is annual housing inventory going back to 1999 in terms of the number of months of supply of homes. So what that means is if no new inventory came onto the market, how long would it take for the existing inventory to all be bought up? A balanced market has about 6 months of inventory. So that means you can, decide to buy a home, you can get approved for a loan, talk with the important people in your life, look at some properties, maybe go back and do a second look, write an offer with an inspection, get something accepted. Kind of just not an overly slow process, but some sanity in that process. I remember a Facebook post a couple of years ago from a realtor here in town that we really respect. She said, we are losing the ability to look before we leap. And in terms of buyers, and it used to be that you could look before you left and that was okay. You could look at a house on like a Friday and say, you know what, next Friday, I'm going to go do a second showing and then I'm going to put in an offer, and that was totally okay. So you can see from 2012, let's go back to the Great Recession. So inventory really climbed in right before 2008. So starting
to very unhealthy levels.
Very unhealthy. So
Yeah.
2006, 2007, the opposite of what is happening right now was happening. So there was extreme supply. I remember living in Oklahoma City at the time, and we traveled a lot to Dallas to visit friends, and we would just see rows of signs of builders of like new neighborhood, come see the house, open house today. And
it was a ghost town. We'd like pull off and like drive to the neighborhood, and there's like not a single car in any driveway, just homes that had been built for years that no one had ever bought.
Yeah. And we were much younger then, and we were nowhere near as sophisticated as we are now, but you get an intuitive sense when you're driving down the road. Even as a 20-year-old, I owned my first home in 2008. So in 2006, I didn't yet own my first home, but I felt funny when I would drive down the road and all I saw everywhere were signs for new neighborhoods. I was like, how many people live in Dallas? Like, what's going on here, Nick? So that's what's happening there. So we see in 2008, there was 10.4 months of inventory. So that's really bad. That's well, I guess it's good if you're a buyer. That's a very, very strong buyer's market. That's sellers have to do everything they can to attract every buyer. They have to offer every concession, stage that house perfectly, make sure it smells like chocolate chip cookies, have every open house, and be really aggressive on price. And then inventory kind of hung out there for a while because people just weren't buying. After 2008, there was a lot of shock in the system. And then it's gone down very consistently since 2012. So, when Nick and I say we started to notice in 2017, is like 2017, 2018 was when we started noticing when we would write offers, like they just weren't that interesting to people anymore. Whereas like just a year before that, like we could get an offer signed in like an hour. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, we'll think about it, or we're going to hold the offer for a day, or we're going to hold it over the weekend. And it's just because of this inventory. And in 2021 and in 2022, we are in a very unhealthy market in that there is essentially not enough inventory. So there's not even enough inventory that the average buyer, the average family can say something like, I really want a 4-bedroom house in this neighborhood, but kind of in this like part of the neighborhood because it's maybe close to where my mom lives, and really want a big kitchen. And I'd really like a big tree in the backyard, right? Those are like really reasonable things for buyers to say. And now it's like, I need a 4-bedroom house in this city. I don't care what school it is. I don't care if it's all the way across town from my mom. I don't care if there's no trees in the yard. I just need a 4-bedroom house so that everyone in my family has a place to sleep at night. And that's not good, right? That's not the way a market should behave. It's very good if you already own real estate because it drives up the value of that real estate drastically. Mm-hmm. So it's been a great time to own real estate. So we're always thinking about things as ourselves as investors and what is the best decision that we can make as investors, but then also thinking about kind of the bigger market and what it means for the health of the market. So when we look at this, inventory is going to go up, right? That's what the Fed wants by increasing interest rates, making, and here the next slide will actually go into that. So the next slide here is monthly inventory. So the Fed wants to make it so that money is more expensive, so that monthly payments are higher, because homeowners shop on monthly payments. They don't shop on price. Even investors really shop on monthly payments, because most investors are looking for a certain cash flow at the end of the month and a certain cash on cash rate of return. And they want to take buyers out of the pool so that inventory can go up, so that there's more months of inventory on the market, so that sellers have to work harder to attract buyers. And they often do that through things like allowing inspection contingencies, allowing financing contingencies, allowing appraisals, lowering the price a little bit. But we're still at historically low inventory, and housing doesn't just come up out of the ground. It has to be built. But we've talked about how construction is extraordinarily hard right now because of building code, because of supply chain, because the cost of construction is so high, because there's very little excess labor help in the market. So a lot has to happen before we even get to a balanced market, let alone a buyer's market. And when we do get to a buyer's market, great, right? Like, we're buyers. Hopefully most of you listening are buyers. So like, let's get to a buyer's market. That's exciting. Like, that's when we can negotiate and get deals and you know, really leverage the power of things like a cash offer or a quick offer, or, you know, buying a house that isn't, you know, in perfect, pristine condition, or closing quickly or closing slowly. You know, all of these maneuvers that have been available to buyers that, you know, lately have not. It's like, okay, I'll give you my firstborn, a pint of blood, and the farm if you'll just give me the house, right? So we have a long time before we get to a balanced market. We have an even longer time before we get to a buyer's market. When we do get to a buyer's market, that is a time for everyone to rejoice.
We hope that time is coming. We'll see. You know, we were writing offers throughout, you know, Q1 this year, and we said now's the time to buy. You know, now is always a good time to buy. We got almost nothing. We bought two homes in all of Q1 2022. We had, you know, over $8 million sitting in Fund 1, and then you know,
and agents would call, and like, they knew that they were asking insane things, because they would laugh and they would be like, Nick, your offer's pretty good, but I've got an offer 40,000 over yours. Do you want to come in at 45? Like, just like they knew,
yeah.
Like they're like, well, I better make the call, because this guy has an all cash, no contingencies offer, close whenever we want. Like, I'd be crazy not to make the call, but I know he's not really going to write this offer. And that, you know, and we said, we refuse to participate in that. We're not going to participate in that craziness.
And then all of a sudden we got a string of homes here in, you know, getting close to the end of Q2 when things softened, when things transitioned a little bit, and we started getting traction on our offers. We're always writing offers. We're always testing the market. And then one day we got an offer below asking, and we're like, okay, we need to buy as much as we possibly can while the opportunity is here. So you may have seen on the news that inventory has gone up this spring. But if you look at this chart closely, you'll see that inventory always goes up in the spring. And so it's a naive perspective to say that inventory has really gone up. You can look at this and see that we are at, you know, half of the inventory level that we were as recently as 2020. And if you remember the last chart, there was very little inventory in 2020. So the levels of inventory are so extraordinarily low. It's you know, it's the lowest for which we have data. And it's so low that it really almost, you know, breaks the housing economy. So there's a huge, you know, dip in inventory to 2021. And then you can see 2022 was even lower than 2021 in March and April. And then finally nosed up just a tiny bit higher in May. In June, I bet it's higher still. I bet the higher interest rates have cooled the market, and there might be significantly higher inventory. But then it's still going to be a couple more months before we get back up to the inventory levels from 2020. We'll see. Maybe there will be a glut of inventory in the fall. It might be a good time to have $30 million in a private equity funds to buy some deals. That I hope you all can look at this chart and see that you don't have to be a rocket scientist, you know, or an expert statistician to see that there could be an opportunity coming. And And this is where we work. We see the seasons. We have fundamentals that we adhere to, and we just look at we look at the data and take it for face value. So it's hard for us to look at any dial on this dashboard and see some kind of crash coming. There's no data to support that information at this time, to support that conclusion at this time. It could happen. Right now it seems like mortgage rates could go to like maybe 8% by the end of the year. So that'd be pretty high. Maybe that will throw enough of a cold blanket that values come down by 20% or something like that. But right now we're just not seeing that data yet.
I think what's more likely to happen is there will be a deceleration of growth. So we've been experiencing 12% growth, 15% growth, 20% growth, just staggering numbers. I think it's important to note, in our pro forma, and what we have always recommended to everyone is that they write their pro forma for a 4% annual appreciation. We didn't create that number ourselves. That's the number that the National Association of Realtors says is the average
100-year
appreciation of over 100 years in non-rural areas across the entire United States. It averages out to about 4%. So if we plan for about a 20 to 25-year hold, that's a good chunk of 100 years. It's probably going to be somewhere around 4%. There's going to be years like the last several years where it's 15%. Great. I'm glad we were able to participate with almost $200 million of assets. I wish we had $1 billion to ride that train of 15%. And there will be times when it's a little bit negative, and that's okay. With a very long-term hold time, numbers change on the spreadsheet, but they don't really change in real life. And then over, a 25-year hold, it's likely that it'll be about 4%. And that's how we write our pro forma. And we recommend everyone write their pro forma that way and just have the fortitude to know that the spreadsheet math doesn't really affect you if you choose not to engage in behavioral decisions that put yourself at harm during the tough times.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about what happens next.
Yeah. So interest rates, we called it wrong back in our state of the market talk in February. So maybe our predictions will be wrong this time around. Hopefully there isn't another China situation, another Ukraine situation. Those two black swans shaped the economy in huge ways.
The big thing that we missed was Ukraine. So, we really thought that the Fed was doing a lot of signaling, a lot of posturing. They were just kind of moving so slowly and having a lot of press conferences. And it seemed like they were trying to say, like, come on, guys, come on, get yourself in order. We're going to have to raise rates. And then the supply chain just crunched. And then when energy crunched too, they had no choice. They couldn't just continue to posture. They had to move very aggressively. And they're continuing to do behavioral signaling by, harking to the former Fed chairman who raised rates very quickly to tame inflation.
Powell just get up and say, I thought Volcker was a good guy. He did the right thing when the hard thing had to be done. Like, I have to chuckle when I hear stuff like that.
Very, very theatrical.
Just trying to project fear into the economy as much as possible to try to cool the economy down. And that's their job. And I think they're doing it successfully with what few tools they have at their disposal. They cannot fix the supply chain. This is the closest. This is all they can really do. Yeah. So Fed funds rate right now is 1.75, up from 0% here very recently, and we'll probably be over 3% by the end of the year. Prime rate will probably be over 6%. Conventional mortgages rate up to 8% or more by the end of the year. So those are the hard numbers to swallow right there. We're going to get there real quick. We're going to probably have another 75 basis point hike, or just back to back 50 basis point hikes. Do your refis now. If there's a refi,
if you haven't done your refi yet, please do it now, because rates are not going down for a while. Lock in that money, lock in your optionality, lock in your liquidity. I wish you had done it a quarter ago. And those of you that have, I think you're probably very excited about that. If you haven't, there is still time, but don't keep waiting. Liquidity that is locked up in a hard asset during a time when you cannot access that liquidity really doesn't benefit you, right? So you want to unlock that liquidity so that you can use it during winter and you can benefit from it. And worst case scenario, you can have it in the bank as security.
Yeah, you don't lose the game when you run out of equity. You lose the game when you run out of cash. Interest rates are likely to remain flat in 2023. So historically, the Fed never raises interest rates in an election year. It's very rare for the Fed to do much with interest rates in an election year.
In an election cycle.
And we're going to be well into that election cycle by that time. We're probably going to see rate decreases in 2024, which I know sounds kind of silly, But if you remember going back to that slide of how long the typical recession lasts, it's not that long. In fact, the average amount of time between when the Fed starts hiking rates and when the Fed starts lowering rates is just 2 years. So by statistical, history average, we're like 20 months away from the Fed lowering rates. Now, I'm not saying that will happen. We have a lot of ground to cover in terms of raising rates, so to speak. But it's an incredibly short time between rate increase cycles and rate decrease cycles. It's going to take a while for inflation to get under control. Now, the metrics that you see on the news might get better kind of quickly because they will frequently drop out food and energy. Look at like core CPI instead of CPI, whatever. There's a million different metrics. They're very easily manipulated. You can look at your year-over-year delta. Well, we had giant inflation, 10 months ago. So in a couple of months, when we start looking at, year-over-year inflation stats, they're not going to look so bad by comparison. But it's probably going to take a good 6 months for inflation to truly get under control. Like China has to get its house in order. The global energy economy has to, achieve equilibrium. The conflict in Ukraine has to end before inflation can really get under control. So it's not something that's going to happen very quickly. We consider there is no end in sight to the shortage of housing until there's some technological change or something that reduces that cost. Yeah. Tiny homes or something like that. Lifestyles change. We switch to, multi-generational households or something like that, or we switch to, small footprint living, kind of European style living. Until there is some huge shift that reduces our housing costs, there's going to be a housing shortage for this foreseeable future. Right now, a lot of people are trying to do adaptive reuse, converting abandoned office towers in urban core into apartment building. People are trying to convert anything into an apartment building right now. There's just such an extraordinary shortage of housing that people are trying to convert anything into an apartment building that possibly could be an apartment building. Watch out for food. This is going to be a source of geopolitical challenge.
This one's tough.
This one's
worldwide,
really bad.
Worldwide, human beings are going to suffer.
Yeah. Children
are going to die. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world. There's just a lot happening in Europe and in Russia. Some sadness is ahead for food in the world supply. Food has long been a crisis, but it will be a crisis that those of us alive today have never seen before.
Yeah, it's not just that there's not enough food, there's not enough fertilizer. So Russia is the world's largest exporter of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, and they export fertilizer to Ukraine and Argentina and all over the world. And so all those crops are going to fail. This is just not like we live in Minnesota. That's the largest corn producer in the country. So we're a little more dialed into maybe agriculture than some folks. It's a really, really, really big deal. And come time for harvest, it's gonna trump gas prices. No one will be talking about gas prices. People will be talking about governments that are toppling in various countries in the world to starving masses of people. So we'll see what happens there. The Supreme Court is an interesting situation as well. It's not a political situation we need to dive into, but there's going to be huge social, political, and economic outcomes of the Roe v. Wade decision. And it seems like the Supreme Court has an appetite to revisit other rulings as well. So gay marriage, it just seems like anything's on the table right this second. And we know that that's going to lead to some very significant, destabilizing events. There's only 9 states in the country right now where Roe v. Wade, rights are enshrined, and we invest in 2 of those 9 states. That's not a coincidence. That's not a political statement. Just we like to invest in.
We like to invest in states where people have optionality.
That's right. Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, that are sociologically sane and stable, and so it's totally unsurprising to us that 2 of the 9 states in the country are the 2 states that we invest in.
Yeah.
And we're divesting from Oklahoma before all this happened, but we just don't think that those decisions are going to be looked upon well in the future.
Yeah. So the Dobbs decision is a great example of a black swan. So everyone could predict that there was a drumbeat of a vocal, strong minority that's been, trying to chip away at abortion rights for 50 years, right? No one, you had to have lived under a rock to not know that. Could someone have predicted the Dobbs decision? Like, maybe not, but then the moment you read it, like, of course, there's very strong groups that have been trying every which way in every which state. And these, a series of events led up to this certain court existing, led up to this certain decision. And now the Black Swan event has happened, right? So if we go back to that slide in the beginning of our presentation, we are all living in the Black Swan event right now today. There are women in this country today that had a choice on Thursday that do not have a choice today. And the fallout of those decisions, or that lack of decision that woman has, is yet to happen. We can make some predictions about what might happen. We don't really know. It's probably going to be bad for the economics of that person, of her education, her career, those sorts of things. And when women struggle financially, countries struggle financially. So there's things that kind of predict the Black Swan event. The Black Swan event happens, and then we can kind of predict what things might look like after that. But it's really a whole new world, and we're going to have to live it together.
Yeah. So more Black Swans will occur. That's the certainty, right? Is that there's going to be more crazy things that happen. Like, it was totally not on my radar that Roe v. Wade could be overturned. Like, it just wasn't. And now we have to think critically about, what impacts does that have in our investment thesis, in the way that we, lead our day-to-day lives. We are people that reproduce prolifically. So this is something that impacts us personally, that we have to think about very carefully. We know that big changes are going to happen. And so we just need to plan for that. We need to assume that big things are going to happen. We need to align our investment thesis with that. And we know that if we do that, if we lean into these things, we're going to be extremely successful.
Let's talk about strategy. So again, kind of that disclaimer that this is what we're doing. This is entertainment purposes for you, but we're going to tell you what we're choosing to do.
Yeah. We're going to be really specific. We talked about mindset stuff. We talked about some abstract charts and graphs. If you're on this call, you're probably interested in real estate investment. So what the heck do you do? Here are some really, really, really clear-cut, simple things to do that will almost certainly yield success for you, given all the data that you see laid before you.
Marshal liquidity. So liquidity now more than ever is very important. Liquidity's always been important, but when money was free and just being printed left and right, it was pretty easy to get one's hands on liquidity. It's going to get a little harder to get one's hands on liquidity. Money is going to be a little bit more expensive, and liquidity is optionality, is power. Nick said there's a reason why we're raising our fund right now, so that we can be very liquid going into negotiations when there's fewer buyers, right? Mm-hmm. So we can have strong offers in a weaker pool and prevail more readily. Get out of paper assets. So having a hard asset, so that's dirt, bricks, sticks. Those are the assets that you want to have. They weather recessions much better than paper assets. And we don't really have any paper assets. We chose to basically divest of all of our paper assets in the CARES Act at the beginning of the pandemic. So that allowed one to liquidate a portion of their 401k with certain favorable tax advantages. And we had slowly been liquidating all of our 401ks, and that was the end of it. And we've been 100% in hard assets since then. So we very much practice what we preach.
Yep. And a paper asset, by the way, in my opinion, is something that is non-tangible, is an abstract idea. So like cryptocurrency, I think, would be kind of the definition of a paper asset. Some cryptocurrency people would say that they are a hard asset, just like gold or just like real estate. Just it's a digital version. Public equities, I think, are maybe the best possible example of that. So if you own stock in Coca-Cola, that's something that is very kind of ethereal in nature. Its value can go to zero. Its true tangible value is difficult to discern. If you are going to invest in something like that, I would suggest investing in, a real estate syndication or something that is backed by a hard asset of some sort or another. Go invest in a gold mining company or something where that there's hard assets behind that paper asset. And really the best thing you can possibly do is get a hard asset that's backed by paper debt, that's leveraged with paper debt. So in this climate, that's a unique combination that is exceptionally rewarded, because the inflation, it raises the value of the hard asset and lowers the value of the paper debt.
In terms of real estate, buy and hold, buy and hold, buy and hold. Of course, that's what we say, right? We're the buy and hold people. It's always a good strategy. It's particularly a good strategy during a recession because, who cares how much Zillow says your house is worth? Your house is worth how much it's worth the day you sell. And if you just choose not to sell, then you choose not to participate in any type of fluctuation in the value of that property. So you just hold through it. It's important to note that our investment thesis was honed in 2008. So, we weren't, big investors at that time, but we owned real estate and we saw the value of those properties go down. And, we thought about selling and it just didn't make any financial sense. And Nick said, there's no way a renter can cause as much damage to the property as how much, equity we don't have in the property, how much negative equity we have. And here we are today. They've ridden the wave of appreciation, and we have 6 figures of equity in each of those properties now. So we're taking that same investment thesis that we honed in a recession. It applies to all phases of the economic cycle, but it thrives in a recession. The Burr method is great. It's been tough to do the Burr method the last several years because prices are just so dang high. It's hard to to get that margin on. Buying low enough that you can invest additional capital into the deal and then come out with a net profit that will, potentially get easier as prices go down, and particularly as it maybe becomes more of a balanced market or, heaven forbid, even a buyer's market. Homes that are ugly are going to sit a little longer, and investors should love homes that are ugly. It's a very exciting way to grow wealth very quickly.
Yep.
Build to rent. Again, that's just kind of coupling construction, increasing supply with a buy and hold, minimum of a 5-year hold period. So we know that, not everyone listening is just going to be in love with the buy and hold philosophy that we have, and that's okay. We hope that eventually we'll change all of your minds, but if we haven't, at least look for a 5-year hold period. Gary Keller has some really interesting stats about the value of a real estate asset. You probably have them closer in the front of your mind than I do, across time.
Which one?
Like across a 10-year period, a 5-year period, a 3-year
Oh,
period.
yeah. So if you go back for the last 40 years, there's only 6 times when you would lose money investing in real estate in a 3-year period. There's only 2 times that you would lose money investing in a 6-year period. And there's 0 times that you would lose money investing in a 10-year period, which is a remarkable track record for any asset class. There's lots of windows in the stock market where you could essentially have a negative return during fairly lengthy periods. And in real estate, you have to almost cherry pick the times to buy and sell to lose money.
Yeah.
But you have to hold for a period of many years. It's not a very liquid asset class. That's its biggest disadvantage, is its illiquidity. But if you go back for the last 40 years, there's just not a lot of time slices where it was possible to lose money. And if you have a reasonably long hold period, it's almost unheard of.
And stay cash flow positive. That's always been important. We have always said that, cash flow is what provides protection. It's unlikely that someone that has a high income is truly going to replace their income with cash flow alone. You really need equity to drive wealth. Cash flow keeps you safe. And I think, over the last several years, a lot of people listening are probably thinking like, well, safe from what? Like, it's just a heyday out there.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's great. And there's just equity galore. Well, maybe we're going into a period that's a little bit less safe, and cash flow is going to be what keeps the lights on, what allows maintenance to carry on, to have a vacancy and not, have to stay up all night worrying about it, and know that debt can be serviced, which is very important in times of recession. So cash flow has always been important. It's even more important now. Lock in as much fixed rate debt as you can. Get your refis, get your refis, get your refis. Literally end this call. And if you don't have a refi, get a plan to get a refi. Work with a lot of lenders, leverage them against each other. Let them know politely, you're looking for the best deal. You want to get the most advantageous debt. Banks have a lot of money to lend right now. So they want to do business as much as you want to do business. And if you have lines of credit, it's always a good idea to check in with your lender. Let them know that you're still around, you're still employed, you're still an investor, you're still good for it. Provide them with the certainty that they need. So the only way that a loan officer can really lose their job is writing bad debt. So you need to remind them that you are not someone that is going to participate in bad debt. I'm just going to check in on your lines. We checked in on 3 of our, many lines a couple weeks ago. Just, hey, how you doing? How have you been? We were supposed to have a meeting a couple months ago. It ended up being canceled because you had COVID. I hope you're okay. Sharing some stories, talking about travel. And oh, by the way, our business is booming and we're good for those lines of credit. Let's extend them for another year.
Here's the actual conversation. We sat down with our banker and we said, how we have these anti-fragile principles in our business, right? Yep. And we have these lines of credits that we have that liquidity available when it's needed the most, right? So how do you feel about the current economic conditions out there? How do you feel about, recession on the horizon? How would that impact the liquidity of our lines of credit? And the banker said, it would be a shame to let a good crisis go to waste. It'd be a shame to waste this, it's an unpleasant thing for a lot of people. It would dishonor that discomfort to freeze up your lines of credit or lock you out of some of your liquidities that you're not able to serve people and do good when that time comes. So a very painfully blunt conversation with our banker to make sure that we're going to be okay when that liquidity is needed the most. To that point, make sure that you're working with multiple lenders. Make sure that you're working with multiple banks. It's incredibly important.
Some of the strategies of things that we're going to avoid is running out of cash. So in winter, if you think about that squirrel, when the squirrel runs out of food, the squirrel dies, right? So a squirrel is to nuts as we are to cash. So don't run out of cash in winter. Don't try to time the market, right?
It's a critical one.
We've shared some things about, where inventory is going and those sorts of things, but for the most part, it's always a good time to buy. That doesn't mean it's always a good time to buy with the exact same strategy or the exact same tactics. You maneuver those things, right? So, let's try and offer at asking. Let's try and offer it under asking. Hey, let's ask for closing costs to be covered. Oh, we couldn't get closing costs covered. We know that's not the right time for this, but always stay in the market, stay knowledgeable, keep moving. The you of 10 years from now will be very glad for any assets that you add to your balance sheet in 2022. Even if the you of 2023 is like, oh, I don't know what's happening. That's okay. Remember, the value of your house is determined the day you sell it, not what Zillow says, not what CNN says. And the you of 2032 and the you of 2042 will be very grateful that you own the assets that you acquired in 2022.
I think there's a concept a lot of people don't understand. So we wrote an offer on a property 5 days ago at $220,000. It was a pretty good deal on a property. The listing agent came back and said, hey, there's another offer. Do you want to improve your offer? And I'm like, nope. And the listing agent was a little confused. And he's like, well, I think if you just increase your offer like 5K, you'd get it. And I'm like, nah, that's okay. And, that was the end of the conversation. Listing agent was clearly a little frustrated, surprised that we wouldn't increase our offer. We didn't get it. Someone else, there was one other offer that was 5K higher than ours. It was a weaker offer, but it was 5K more, it's 225. So they took it. We didn't get the property, but we got the data. We got the data. We know that that's the state of the market. There's still multiple offers out there. We didn't come in below asking, but we didn't go above asking either. And it's a fair bet that whoever looked at that property is going to be looking at, 10 other properties that we look at, the next 10 properties that we look at. So really writing offers is the best way to gauge market interest. You never want to waste time. You never want to throw out a bunch of lowball offers. Our offer was strong. It was at asking price. We would have been happy to get it at asking price, but we think we could probably get some houses below asking price here pretty soon. So if we didn't get it, that's fine. There's going to be better opportunities in the future. So just you have to write offers. You're not going to get deals if you don't write offers, and you're not going to really have a feel for where the market's at if you're not writing offers.
Things that we avoid are flips. We've always avoided flips from just like a love perspective. If you've flipped it and taken good care of it, you might as well keep it and rent it. And then it's terrible from a tax perspective. But right now it's particularly dangerous as it's kind of like quicksand in the market, right? You never want to kind of get stuck in that. Retail and office, there's just too much price discovery still happening there. Maybe a few more years post-COVID. Those will be great opportunities. I'm sure there are, wonderful opportunities out there for someone who's willing to, maybe gamble a little bit more than we are. But, we tend to be, we say that our philosophy is get rich for sure. It just takes some time.
So there's a portfolio of office for sale, all around us right now.
Over there.
All around us. There are so many office buildings for sale right now, being privately marketed. They're not publicly listed for sale. Right now, Mayo Clinic, their official mantra is work from home forever. Now, at some point, we have a feeling that's going to go the other direction. But until that happens, we're not buying office at any price. I mean, they're pretty attractively priced. It's really tempting. We could maybe use a bigger office for our team, but it just doesn't make sense until it's a sure thing.
avoid hold periods of less than 5 years, and kind of going right along with that, avoid build for sale.
I would not want to be a home builder right now. I would not want to be developing residential lots for sale right now. I think that would be a really treacherous industry to be getting into.
Avoid variable rate debt. Variable rate debt has not been bad for the last 10 years, but right now it's probably not the best choice. And don't necessarily wait for rates to be low again. You know, if they're this low again, great. I think we're all going to rejoice, but maybe it won't happen, and that's okay too. Nalini asked, could we shine some light on a home equity loan versus a cash out refi? Pros and cons, which option would be better under which situation? So a home equity loan would be that you keep the existing mortgage in place, and then you add a second piece of debt, and it's a loan, so the money goes into your bank account. We've done a lot of those in the last, say, like 6 months, because we have some really favorable first mortgages on properties that we don't want to get rid of, but we want to add additional, we want to pull out additional equity, so we want to add additional leverage. So that's an option. A home equity line of credit is kind of it's a less good option in these uncertain times, because it means that you have the ability to call the bank and say, hey, I have a HELOC for 100,000. I'd like to advance, 50,000 of it. And they might say, well, we just decided to freeze all of our HELOCs yesterday because of, something on the news or whatever. So they're a hair less liquid than a loan where the money is just already in your bank account. The benefit is you're not paying interest on money that you're potentially not using. And then a cash out refi is just starting the debt all the way over. So just paying off whatever debt is currently on the property, putting a new debt instrument in. Right now, that's probably, if you're able to keep your existing debt and get a second piece of debt, that's probably the best way to go, because it's likely that your first piece of debt is very advantageous. Unless you're a pretty skilled investor and you're just very in the market every day with bankers and lenders, that's probably going to be pretty hard. Most lenders are not going to want to add a second piece of debt in uncertain times. We've been able to make those arrangements because we're just so large, and I encourage you to try. I'm in no means, raining on anyone's parade. A cash out refi wipes out your first piece of debt. So if you have 2% or 2.5%, you're putting on a cash out refi at 6%. Maybe it makes sense if you're unlocking enough equity that you're able to go buy your next cash flowing asset. That's kind of the deciding factor for me. If you're able to get, that golden goose, if it can lay a whole egg, for me, that's kind of the deciding factor. If you're just getting some liquidity and it's in the bank, but you're not quite able to do a whole deal with it, that's a little bit less exciting to me. Human behavior would say that we're probably just going to spend that money and waste it. So probably would want to avoid that. But hopefully that addresses that. Todd asks, can you discuss avoid Airbnb? Yeah, so that goes back to optionality. So people need a place to live. People need food, shelter, transportation, clothing. Really, other than that, humans truly don't need much. Even medical care is kind of optional. We know that in times of recession, chronic illness goes up because humans seek less medical care. People don't need vacations. And if they lose their employment or inflation is so high that they can't put food on the table, they're going to stop going on vacation.
Yep.
So if you have a short-term rental property, we've always said, if that's just a strategy that just really speaks to you, and you love the hospitality aspect of it and the decorating and the communication aspect of it and kind of running that small business and the tax advantages and the additional cash flow, invest in a property where you have optionality that you can rent it as a medium term or a long-term rental, or you can sell it just as a normal home to a normal family.
Yep.
It's all about keeping optionality.
And in the industry right now, and I'd say we never want to be Debbie Downers, but in the industry right now, we're definitely seeing a huge slowdown in the Airbnb space. And this is something where I think, if you go back to our power hour, from 6 months ago, from a year ago, we've been kind of throwing out those cautions. We've seen people who have made huge sums of money in these, luxury vacation rental spaces. And a lot of people have been very successful. And I think that we've been wrong for years about that, and probably forgone lots of profits by not getting in the game. But so if we go back to like a year ago, the number one question we would get from prospective investors is, why aren't you doing vacation rentals?
Mm-hmm.
And now not the number one, but maybe the number 2 or 3 inquiry we get is, how do I get out of my vacation rental to get into your fund? There's lots of people where like they're doing okay, they're not losing money yet, but they're not
worried.
they're making a lot less money than they were making the year before. Bookings are happening, but they're maybe happening like right before right before the home is vacant or something, instead of months out. And then if there is a full on recession, the $1 million beach house may not be the best investment vehicle from a resale perspective. And it also may not be the most popular travel destination. People might seek out a microtel or something like that instead of the luxury beach house. So again, I know there's a lot of people on this call that might be something painful for them to hear. They're in that space. If you're successful in that space, be successful in that space. But from our perspective, I feel like we've seen a little bit of a bubble, in that space. And we just see elevated risk, escalated risk in that asset class. So we have about 20 Airbnbs in our market. It's out of 600 units, so it's not many units, and they're very utilitarian Airbnbs that for medical tourism. So people are going to rent them almost no matter what. Well, I shouldn't say that because during COVID, for a minute there, the Mayo Clinic basically closed to medical tourism, and we had to shut them all down. And we converted them to long-term rentals. So we had
the optionality.
We had the optionality to do it. Exactly. So if you have, a normal house that you can convert to a long-term rental, you're good to go. So I appreciate the question. And anyone else, feel free to throw your questions in there. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we've had far fewer questions tonight, which is okay. I'd like to think that this is just so riveting that we're just answering everyone's questions before you even know you have a question. Right. But we love questions. They kind of keep us on our toes.
Yeah. So avoid what everyone else is doing.
Blue ocean. Yeah,
blue ocean. You want to be doing counter cyclical things. So the moment we hear recession, we think, now is the time to buy. Be careful with traditional real estate syndications. So we have a private equity fund. Go to blackswanfunds2.com right now if you want to invest in funds 2. So we could potentially be maybe hurting ourselves in this narrative or whatever, but we do believe that our fund is very different from any other fund that we've ever heard of. In the 80s, there was a syndication collapse. A lot of people lost a lot of money in syndication and in real estate syndications. And syndication was kind of a pejorative for a couple of decades, and then it really became ascendant again in the 2000s. Didn't do as great in the crash, obviously, in 2008, and then it's really roared back now with tons of coaches and camps and stuff that you can attend to learn to be a syndicator. The reason why we, would just maybe throw a little caution out there with a traditional syndication model is that they typically have a couple of features we don't like. So they typically have lots of fees coming out of the investor's pocket, the LP's pocket on the front end of the deal, going into the GP's pocket. They frequently have like a preferred rate of return, which seems like it's something that maybe protects the limited partners, but it can really work against them. So let's say there's a recession, several years go by, and that pref accrues. Let's say there's like a 8% preferred rate of return. 3 years go by without a lot of cash flow. Suddenly there's a 24% pref that's accrued, and that general partner, their incentives are now totally out of whack with the limited partners. So the general partner, they're so buried in that pref that they are never going to actually make money off of the deal. Their equity might as well be worthless because they're buried by that pref. I hope this makes sense what I'm saying here. And then they might collect a fee to sell the asset. So the only way they can ever make money is to dump that asset, even if that means taking a loss for the LPs. So the GP can make money on the way in and the LPs don't make money. And the GP can make money on the way out and the LPs don't make money. And this is how there was a syndication collapse in the 80s.
And this is what has happened over the last several years, where deals have churned very quickly. And it's been this like badge of honor, like, oh, I did my deal in 18 months, or I did my deal in 30 months. Well, yeah, if you're riding, a 15%, appreciation wave and you're collecting fees on both sides of that, like you're going to be incentivized to do that. When you take that variable away, that variable being, really, really strong appreciation, it's really going to go back to operations. So, we talked about the decade of the operator for our community hour in April. This is the decade of the operator. This is the decade where if you take appreciation off the table, what's left? And that's really where, we're going to see, who's swimming naked, as Warren would say.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's talk about mindset and media. We're going to go, just quick on this because it's really simple concept. stand guard at the door of your mind. It is the most important asset you have. Everything else that we've talked about is largely irrelevant in comparison to how you feel when you wake up in the morning. Do you feel like I have a limitless opportunity before me? I have the resources, the connections, the thoughts that I need to succeed. I spoke with someone on the phone last week, and I said, what are you hearing in your circles about recession, or how are you feeling? And she said, I just choose not to participate. I know that it's happening around me, but it's not going to happen to my business, and I just choose not to participate. And I thought that is like so powerful, right?
Yep.
Just choose not to participate. Say that I march to the beat of a different drummer. The purpose of media is not really to inform. It's
Yep.
to get adrenaline going, so that you make emotional decisions, so that you stay attuned, so that you feel like you have to stay locked onto that channel because you need to have that information to survive, right? We're talking about thriving. And it's really hard to think about thriving if your brain is in survival mode.
So this was a real life-changing thing for me. And we learned this from Tony Robbins. Like, it's easy to get like really caught up in the narrative of the news, or to think that news is like biased or right or left or whatever. No, news is a business. Social media is a business. They're there to generate ad revenue. So like, what generates the most amount of ad revenue? What has the most sticky eyeballs? It's, if it bleeds, it leads. Negative press. And so I would encourage you to just take a break from many of those news media sources.
Tim Ferriss will say, if it's important enough, you will find out, right?
Yeah.
If it's something like
Yeah.
September 11th or something, like a friend will call you.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to need to get on whatever your preferred news sources to find out that, something like September 11th has happened. A friend is going to call or text you and say, are you okay? Or did you hear? Our trainer at the gym said something the other day. There's like, one of those stands that has like 6 televisions all around it. And Minnesota is a very purple place. So like each one is a different flavor of the political spectrum. And he said, I look over there for a few seconds, a few times a day, and all I'm looking for is if they all say the same thing, because then I know it's important. And most of the time, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
And I thought that's like pretty good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I want to end on this visual because I think it's just really simple. If stand guard at the door of your mind is the most important piece from thinking about mindset, we just like showered you with all sorts of statistics and what's happening in the market and stories and anti-fragile principles and this sort of thing. This comes from Gary Keller. So we think of investing as a yo-yo, right? We think of it as just up and down, up and down. And there's a fear of, well, I don't want to get caught, while the yo-yo is going down. But that's really not true. Investing is a yo-yo on an escalator. And so our call to you is to get on the escalator.
Stairs was the graphic I did.
Stairs.
Sorry, Gary.
I like stairs because it's a little more like you got to put some effort into it, right? You're not just like passively. Yeah, I like it. But you need to get on the escalator. And you need to know that the yo-yo is going to happen, and that's okay. That's totally okay. That's part of the deal, but you just continue to go up. And if you shift your focus to getting up the stairs or up the escalator instead of focusing on that yo-yo, you will have very good lifetime outcomes. And that's what we're doing with our own lives is we chose, over a decade ago that we were going to get ourselves on the escalator. We were not going to worry too much about the yo-yo. And we're just going to ride it as long as we have the privilege to be alive.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about our deal. We're so excited. This thing is like just a gem. So we are under contract on another asset that will go into Black Swan Fund 2. Just a really cool asset. So this is residences of Old City Hall. So it used to be the City Hall of Rochester. It was the City Hall for about 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Just a really gorgeous building. I mean, you can just see there the
Art Deco,
the marble.
Yeah.
It's just in the
architected by Harold Crawford, one of like the most famous architects in our area in the Mayo family. It was converted to an apartment building and about 25 years ago, and it could use some updates, and it could just use a new owner. Previous owner has done an amazing job taking care of it and is ready to pass the torch to someone that is ready to love it. we're projecting like a 30% cash on cash rate of return for this particular asset. This is going to be a out of the park home run deal. We've been able to negotiate a 50% seller carry with no interest, no payments for 5 years. So it's easy, quote unquote, to hit a 30% cash on cash when half of your purchase price is interest free for 5 years. And we're able to just put together an absolutely spectacular win-win deal with this particular owner, almost identical to the deal that we put together on Nicholas and Oliver. Just amazing urban core location. Just a site of tremendous cultural heritage. So this is a kind of interesting symmetry with where we started the evening here. But let me see here. So
isn't that a crazy flower arrangement?
yeah. So there's a mayor. His name is Chuck Hazama. He was the mayor of Rochester for a couple of decades, from 1979 to 1998. And that was
all of Nick's young life.
All of my young life when I lived in Rochester. That's right. I left in 2000. And that's when Rochester, as golden years of Rochester, it was ranked, number one place to live in the whole country year after year after year after year. And this residence of Old City Hall, that was his office. He actually removed the doors from his office. He believed in transparency, so much. And there's still no doors on that office today. That he retired that building. So one of the last things that he did was they built an entirely new city hall. So he, closed up shop at the end of his tenure. Our kids go to school at a church, like the school is at the church, and in off days, and they had this insane.
Well, you missed a step.
Okay, sorry.
So Chuck passed away.
Well, yeah, I was going to circle back around to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, yeah.
Go for it.
So
we're trying to complete each other's sentences. It's
yeah.
not working this time. It's just like such a crazy story.
So our kids go to the school, and there's this insane bouquet of flowers there, and we're like, what's this for? And they said, I don't know. There was some memorial service. Would you like them? Sure. So we decided to take the flowers home, and Elaine pieced together. So Chuck recently passed away. He passed away in November. But one of the kind of cultural legacies he had was he created Rochester Fest, just this summer festival that Rochester has every year with a parade and food vendors and live music and just all kinds of family friendly stuff. So they decided to celebrate Chuck's life during Rochester Fest at the place where our kids go to school. We don't live in a town of 100 people. Like, this is just a really crazy string of circumstances that the day they had Chuck's memorial service, we got under contract on City Hall, and I actually got to walk through his office, and I don't know, there's a really good energy there.
Yeah, when I brought these flowers home, Nick's like, what are these? And I'm like, the school, they were like putting them up in a dumpster. Like, I wasn't gonna like just let these rot. They're just gorgeous. And I had known from looking through the Rochester Fest schedule that his celebration of life had happened, and he's originally from Hawaii, which is why these flowers are so tropical with the birds of paradise and all of that. And they were actually sitting in our kitchen for several hours Friday night. And then Nick just kind of like looked over and he said, Elaine, we just bought Chuck's office. And I'm just, wow. We get to live a life of just really interesting things happen. And we're not super religious people, but I don't know, we believe in something. I don't exactly know what it is. And I really feel like this is Chuck saying, like, please take good care of my office.
Absolutely.
So that's our little story. They look amazing.
Yeah.
Our house is air conditioned because it's summertime, so they're doing really well.
Yeah, it's like a 100-pound pot of flowers. It's crazy. Yeah. So that's the latest deal going into Fund 2. We're unbelievably excited about it. It's a really neat asset. It's going to have really good returns, and it's a good story.
Yeah. Any questions before we wrap up here? Make ourselves available if anyone has a last question here.
Those are all of our slides.
Yeah.
If y'all want to have a call with us, go to meetblackswan.com. We're always our phones are always available. So
absolutely. Otherwise, we will see you guys on July 7th in the evening is our next webinar to really dive into the due diligence and the pro forma and everything that we've done for residents of Old City Hall, and its financial performance that we predict, and its place in the fund. So we're really excited about that. We're working on a couple of other deals.
Lots of good deals coming up.
Just kind of, inching forward like we always do. Really excited about the possibilities of some things that are going to go into fund too.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right.
Have a great recession, everyone. Hope you got some certainty, some clarity, some confidence, some conviction from our call today.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone.